For a day or two he followed my injunctions, taking a tankard of small ale to his breakfast, the same quantity with his dinner, a pint of Madeira for his supper, and a sober glass or two before going to bed. But when he grew well, his brother planters came round him again. The drinking was renewed, and in the morning I would find him again with parched throat, tongue dry and shaking hand, ready to belabor, to curse, and to rail at everybody. If one wanted an example for the young how strong drink biteth like a serpent and stingeth like an adder, here was a case the sight of which might have caused all young men to forswear drunkenness. Alas, there are plenty of such examples to be seen in every part of England, yet the younger men still continue to drink, and that, I think, worse than their fathers. This man, however, who was not yet 35, in the very prime of strong and healthy manhood, had his finger joints swollen and stony from taking much too 87 wine. He commonly ate but little meat, craving continually for more drink, and his understanding, which was by nature, I doubt not, clear and strong, was now brutish and stupid. Thinking over this man, and of the power, even unto death, which he possessed over his servants and slaves, the words came into my mind: It is not for kings, O Lemuel, it is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes strong drink. Nay, more, and this I say, knowing that many godly men will not agree with me. I am fully persuaded that there is no man in the whole world so good, and so strong in virtue and religion, that he should be suffered to become the master or despot over any other man, even over a company of poor and ignorant blacks, or a gang of transported thieves. When I think of those unhappy people, driven forth in the morning, heavy-eyed and downcast, to the hard day's work, and when I remember how they crept home at night, after being driven, cursed, and beaten all day long, and when I think upon their drivers, overseers, and masters, and of their hard and callous hearts, I am moved to cry aloud, if any would hear me, that to be a slave is wretched indeed, but that to own and to drive slaves should be a thing most dangerous for any who would continue members of Christ's church. When I told Barnaby the surprising news that his sister was not only safe, but a servant like ourselves upon the same estate, I looked that he would rejoice. On the contrary, he fell into a strange mood, swearing at this ill stroke, as he called it. He said that he never had the least doubt as to her safety, seeing there were so many in the West Country who knew and respected her father, and would willingly shelter her. Then he dwelt upon certain evils, of which I confess I had thought little, which might befall her. And lastly, he set forth with great plainness the increased dangers in escaping when one has to carry a woman or a wounded man, a thing, he pointed out, which had caused his own capture after Sedgemoor. Then he opened up to me the whole business of our escape. Last Saturday night, he said, while you were sleeping, I made my way to the port, and having a shilling or so left, I sought out a tavern. There is one hard by the bridge, a house of call for sailors, where I had the good fortune to find a fellow who can do for us all we want, if his money hold out, which I doubt. He is a carver by trade and a convict like ourselves, but is permitted by his master to work at his trade in the town. He hath been, it is true, branded in the hand, but, Lord, what signifies that? He was once a thief, well, he is now an honest lad again, who asks for nothing but to get home again. John Nuthall is his name. Go on, Barnaby. We are already in such good company that another rogue or two matters little. This man came here secretly last night, while you were in the sick house. He is very hot upon getting away, and because I am a sailor and can navigate a craft, which he cannot do, he will take 288 with him, not only myself, but also all my party. Now listen, Humphrey. He hath bought a boat of a Guinea man in the harbor, and because, to prevent the escape of servants, every boat is licensed and her owner has to give security to the governor's officers, he hath taken this boat secretly up a little creek of which he knows, and hath there sunk her 3 feet deep. The masts, the sails, the oars, and the other gear he hath also safely bestowed in a secret place. But we cannot sail without water, provisions, nor without a compass at least. If our party is to consist of sister, Robin, you, John Nuthall, and myself, 5 in all, we shall have to load the boat with provisions, and I must have a compass. I looked for a boatful with ourselves and John Nuthall. Now we have Cis as well, and the boat is but small. Where shall we get provisions, and where shall we lay our hands upon the money to buy what we want? He could talk of nothing else, because his mind was full of his plan. Yet it seemed to me a most desperate enterprise, thus to launch a small boat upon the wide ocean, and in this cockleshell to brave the waves which are often fatal to the tallest ships. Tut, man, said Barnaby, we are not now in the season of the tornadoes, and there is no other danger upon these seas. I would as lief be in an open boat as in a brigantine. Sharks may follow us, but they will not attack a boat. Calamaries they talk of, big enough to lay their arms round the boat and so to drag it under. But such monsters have I never seen, any more than I have seen the great whale of Norway or the monstrous birds of the southern seas. There is only one danger, Humphrey, my lad. Here he laid his hand upon mine and became mighty serious. If we are taken, we shall be flogged, all of us. 39 lashes they will lay on, and they will brand us. For myself, I value not their 39 lashes a brass farthing, nor their branding with a hot iron, which can but make a man jump for a day or two. To me, this risk against the chance of escape matters nothing. Why, when I was cabin boy, I got daily more than 39 lashes, kicks, cuffs, and rope sendings. Nay, I remember, when we sat over the Latin syntax together, my daily ration must have been 39, more or less, and Dad's arm was stronger than you would judge to look at him. If they catch me, let them lay on their 39 and be damned to them. But you and Robin, I doubt, think otherwise. I would not willingly be flogged, Barnaby, if there were any way of escape even by death. So I thought. And as for Robin, if he recovers, which I doubt, he too, if I know him, would rather be killed than be flogged. That comes of Oxford, said Barnaby. And then there is Cis. Humphrey, my lad, it goes to my heart to think of that poor girl, stripped to be lashed like a black slave or a Bristol drab. Barnaby, she must never run that dreadful risk. Then she must remain behind, and here she runs that risk every day. What prevents yon drunken sot? The taste of that cudgel still sticks in my gizzard. I say, what prevents him from tying her up today, or tomorrow, or every day? Barnaby, I say that she must never run that risk, for if we are caught— I stopped. Before we are caught, you would say, Humphrey. We are of the same mind there. But who is to kill her? Not Robin, for he loves her. Not you, because you have too great a kindness for her. Not I, because I am her brother. What should I say to my mother when I meet her after we are dead, and she asks me who killed Alice? Barnaby, if she is to die, let us all die together. I, he replied, though I have, I confess, no great stomach for dying, yet since we have got her with us, it must be done. 'Tis easy to let the water into the boat, and so, in 3 minutes, with no suspicion at all, and my mother never to know anything about it, she would have said her last prayers, and we should be all sinking together with never a gasp left. I took him after this talk to the sick house, where Alice was beginning her second night of nursing. Barnaby saluted his sister as briefly as if her presence was the thing he most expected. The room was lit by a horn lanthorn containing a great candle, which gave enough light to see Robin on the bed and Alice standing beside him. The woman called Deb was sitting on the floor, wrapped in her rug. Sis, said Barnaby, I have heard from Humphrey how thou wast cozened out of thy money and enticed on board ship. Well, this world is full of villains, and I doubt whether I shall live to kill them all. When I must kill and when I must cudgel. Patience, therefore, and no more upon this head. Well, sis, dost love to be a servant? Surely not, Barnaby. Wouldst like to get thy freedom again? I know not the meaning of thy words, brother. Madam says that those who have interest at home may procure pardons for their friends in the plantations. Also that those whose friends have money may buy their freedom from servitude. I am sure that Mr. Bosquirrel would willingly do this for Robin and for Humphrey. But for myself, how can I ask him? How can I ever let him know where I am and in what condition? Ay, but I meant not that way, child. Wilt thou trust thyself to us? She looked at Robin. I cannot leave him, she said. No, we shall wait until he is dead, or perhaps better. But he only added this to please his sister. When he is better, sis, thou wilt not be afraid to trust thyself with us? I am not afraid of any danger, even of death with you, if that is the danger in your mind, Barnaby. Good, then we understand each other. There are other dangers for a young and handsome woman, and maybe worse dangers. Hast any money at all, by chance? Nay, the man Penny took all my money. Barnaby, for 5 or 6 minutes without stopping, spoke upon this topic after the manner of a sailor. My turn will come, he added. No money, child? 'Tis a great pity. Had we a few gold pieces now. Some women have rings and chains, but of course. Nay, brother, chains I never had, and as for rings, there were but two that ever I had, one from Robin, the day that I was plighted to him, and one from the man who made me marry him and put it on in the church. The former did I break and throw away when I agreed, for your dear lives, Barnaby, oh, for the lives of all. I know, said Barnaby. Patience, oh, I shall get such a chance some day. The other I threw away when I fled from my husband at the church door. If we only had a little money. 'Tis pity that we should fail for want of a little money. Why, said Alice, I had quite forgot, I have something that may bring money. She pulled from her neck a black ribbon on which was a little leathern bag. Tease the ring the Duke gave me at Ilchester long ago. I have never parted with it. God grant, he said, when he gave it to me, that it may bring thee good luck. Will the ring help, Barnaby? I took it first from her hand. Why, I said, it is a sweet and costly ring. Jewels I know and have studied. If I mistake not, these emeralds must be worth a great sum. But how shall we dispose of so valuable a ring in this place, and without causing suspicion? Give it to me. Barnaby took it, looked at it, and laid it, bag and all, in his pocket. There are at the port merchants of all kinds, who will buy a ship's cargo of sugar one minute and the next will sell you a red herring. They will also advance money upon a ring. As for suspicion, there are hundreds of convicts and servants here. Tease but to call the ring the property of such an one, and no questions will be asked. My friend John Nuthall, the carver, shall do this for us. And now, sis, I think that our business is as good as done. Have no fear, we shall get away. First get Robin well and then— Here Barnaby gazed upon her face with affection and with pity. But sister, understand rightly, 'tis no child's play of hide and seek. 'Tis life or death, life or death. If we fly, we must never come back again, understand that well. Since we are in the Lord's hands, brother, why should we fear? Take me with you, let me die if you must die, and if you live I am content to live with you, so that my husband never find me out. Chapter 44. A scare. A dear. There is between the condition of the mind and that of the body an interdependence which cannot but be recognized by every physician. So greatly has this connection affected some of the modern physicians, as to cause doubts in their minds whether there be any life at all hereafter, or if, when the pulse ceases to beat, the whole man should become a dead and senseless lump of clay. In this, they confuse the immortal soul with the perishable instruments of brain and body, through which in life it manifests its being and betrays its true nature, whether of good or ill. Thus, the condition in which Robin now lay clearly corresponded, as I now understand, with the state of his mind, induced by the news that Alice, to save his life, had been betrayed into marrying his cousin. For at the hearing of that dreadful news he was seized with such a transport of rage, not against that poor innocent victim, but against his cousin, as threatened to throw him into madness. And on recovering from this access, he presently fell into a kind of despair, in which he languished during the whole voyage. So also in a corresponding manner, after a fever, the violence of which was like to have torn him to pieces, he fell into a lethargy, in which, though his fever left him, he continued to wander in his mind, and grew, as I could not fail to mark, daily weaker in his body, refusing to eat, though Alice brought him dainty broth of chicken, delicate panadas of bread and butter, fruit boiled with sugar, and other things fit to tempt a sick man's appetite, provided by the goodness of Madam. This lady was in religion a Romanist. By birth she was a Spanish quadroon. To escape the slavery to which the color of her grandmother doomed her, she escaped from Cuba and found her way to Jamaica, where she met with our master. And whether she was lawfully married unto him, I will not, after her kindness to Alice and her faithfulness to myself as regards Robin, so much as ask. Robin, therefore, though the fever left him, did not mend. On the contrary, as I have said, he grew daily weaker, so that I marveled at his lasting so long, and looked to see him die, as so many die in the early morning, when there is a sharpness or eagerness in the air, and the body is exhausted by long sleep. Yet he died not. And now you shall hear how, through the Duke of Monmouth's ring, we escaped from our servitude. God grant, said the Duke, that it bring thee good luck. This was a light and unconsidered prayer, forgotten as soon as uttered, meant only to please the ear 292 of a child, and yet in a manner most marvelous to consider, it proved the salvation of us all. What better luck could that ring cause than that we should escape from the land of Egypt, the house of bondage? I have disposed of the ring, Barnaby told me a few days later. That is to say, John Nuthall has secretly pledged it with a merchant for 20 guineas. He said that the ring belongs to a convict, but many of them have brought such precious things with them in order to buy their freedom. He owns that the stones are fine, and very willingly gave the money on their security. Then nothing remains, I said, but to get away. John Nuthall has bought provisions and all we want, little by little, so as to excite no suspicion. They are secretly and safely bestowed, and half the money still remains in his hands. How goes Robin? He draws daily nearer to his grave. We cannot depart until either he mends or dies. 'Tis another disaster, Barnaby. Aye, but of disaster we must not think. Robin will die, yet our own case may be as bad if it comes to scuttling the ship. Cheer up, lads, many men die, but the world goes on. Poor Robin, every man for himself and the Lord for us all. Sis will cry, but even if Robin recovers he cannot marry her, a consideration which ought to comfort her. And for him, since nothing else will serve him, it is best that he should die. Better make an end at once than go all his life with hanging head for the sake of a woman, as if there are not plenty women in the world to serve his turn. I know not what ails him that he does not get better. The air is too hot for him, he hath lost his appetite. Barnaby, I cried, moved to a sudden passion of pity such as would often seize me at that time, saw one ever ruin more complete than ours? Had we been fighting for Spain and the accursed Inquisition, we could not have been more heavily punished. And we were fighting on the Lord's side. Dad was with us too. And see how he was served. The Lord, it seems, doth not provide his servants with arms, or with ammunition, or with commanders. Otherwise, the Duke this day would be in St. James's Palace wearing his father's crown, and you would be a court physician with a great wig and a velvet coat, instead of a Monmouth cap and a canvas shirt. And I should be an admiral. But what doth it profit to ask why and wherefore? Let us first get clear of the wreck. Well, I wish we were to take Robin with us. 'Twill be a poor business going back to Bradford Orcas without him. We waited, therefore, day after day, for Robin either to get better or to die, and still he lingered, seemingly in a waste or decline, but such as I had never before seen. And I know not what would have happened to him, whether he would have lived or died, but then there happened a thing which caused us to wait no longer. It was this. The master having, according to his daily custom, gone the round of his estate, that is to say, having seen his servants all at work under their drivers, some planting with the hoe, some weeding, some cutting the maize, some gathering yams, potatoes, cassavi, or bonavist for provisions, some attending the ingenio or the still house, did unluckily take into his head to visit the sick house. What was more unfortunate, this desire came upon him after he had taken a morning dram, and that of the stiffest. Not, indeed, enough to make him drunk, but enough to make him obstinate and wilful. When I saw him standing at the open door, I perceived by the glassiness of his eyes and the unsteadiness of his shoulders that he had already begun the day's debauch. He was now in a most dangerous condition of mind. Later in the day, when he was more advanced in drink, he might be violent, but he would be much less dangerous, because he would afterwards forget what he had said or done in his cups. So, Sir Doctor, he said, I have truly a profitable pair of servants. One who pretends to cure everybody and so escapes work, and your cousin who pretends to be sick and so will do none. A mighty bargain I made, truly, when I bought you both. With submission, sir, I said, I have within the last week earned for your honor 10 guineas worth of fees. Well, that is as it may be. How do I know what hath gone into your own pocket? Where is this malingering fellow? Make him sit up. Sit up, I say, ye skulking dog, sit up. Sir, I said, still speaking with the greatest humility, nobody but the Lord can make this man sit up. And, indeed, Robin did not comprehend one word that was said. I gave £50 for him only a month ago. Am I to lose all that money, I ask? £50, because I was told that he was a gentleman and would be ransomed by his family. Hark ye, doctor, you must either cure this man for me, or else, by the Lord, you shall have his ransom added to your own. If he dies, I will double your price, mark that. I said nothing, hoping that he would depart. As for Alice, she had turned her back upon him at his first appearance, as Madame had ordered her to do, so that he might not notice her. Unfortunately, he did not depart, but came into the room, looking about him. Certainly, he was not one who would suffer his servants to be negligent, even in the smallest things. Here is fine work, he said. Sheets of the best, a pillow, what hath a servant to do with such luxuries? My cousin is a gentleman, I told him, and accustomed to lie in linen. The rug which is enough for him in health must have a sheet to it as well, now that he is sick. Humph, and whom have we here? Who art thou, madam, I wish to know? Alice turned. I am your honor's servant, she said. I am employed in the sick house when I am not in the sewing room. A servant? Oh, madam, I humbly crave your pardon. I took you for some fine lady. I am honored by having such a servant. All the rest of my women servants go in plain smock and petticoat. But, here he smiled, to so lovely a girl as Alice Aiken, fair Alice, sweet Alice, we must give the bravest and daintiest. To thee, my dear, nothing can be denied. Those dainty cheeks, those white hands, were never made to adorn a common coif. Mistress Alice, we must be better acquainted. This is no fit place for you. Not the sick house, but the best room in my house shall be at thy service. Sir, I ask for nothing but to sit retired, and to render such service as is in my power. To sit retired, why that cannot be longer suffered. 'Twould be a sin to keep hidden any longer this treasure, this marvel, I say, of beauty and grace. My servant, nay, 'tis the whole island. Who are thy servants, thou to render service? 'Tis for me, madam, to render service to thy beauty. He took off his hat and flourished it, making a leg. Then, sir, said Alice, Suffer me, I pray, to go about my business, which is with this sick man, and not to hear compliments." He caught her hand and would have kissed it, but she drew it back. "Nay, coy damsel," he said, "I swear I will not go without a kiss from thy lips. Kiss me, my dear." She started back, and I rushed between them. At that moment Madame herself appeared. "What do you hear?" she cried, catching his arm. "What has this girl to do with you? Come away, and leave her in peace." "Go back to the house, woman," he roared, breaking from her and flourishing his stick so that I thought he was actually going to cudgel her. "Go back, or it will be the worse for you." "What? Am I master here or you? Go back, I say." Then a strange thing happened. She made no reply, but she turned upon him eyes so full of authority that she looked like a queen. He shifted his feet, made as if he would speak, and finally obeyed, and went out of the place to his own house with the greatest meekness, soberness, and quietness. Presently Madame came back. "I blame thee not, child," she said. "It is with him as I have told thee. When he begins to drink, the devil enters into him. Dost think he came here to see the sick man? No, but for thy fair eyes, inflamed with love as well as with drink. At such times no one can rule him but myself, and even I may fail. Keep snug, therefore. Perhaps he may forget thee again, but indeed I know not." She sighed and left us. Chapter 45. Barnaby the Avenger. Adi? The man did not come back. During the whole day I remained with Alice in fear, but he molested us not. When the sun set and the field hands returned, I was in two minds whether to tell Barnaby what had happened or not. But when I saw his honest face, streaked with the dust of the day's work, and watched him eating his lump of salt beef and basin of yellow porridge with as much satisfaction as if it had been a banquet of all the dainties, I could not bear, without greater cause, to disturb his mind. "Tonight," he told me, when there was no more beef and the porridge was all eaten, "there is a great feast at the bridge. I would we had some of their sherris and Madeira. The governor of Nevis landed yesterday and is entertained today by our governor. All the militia are feasting, officers and men. Nobody will be on the lookout anywhere, and it is a dark night with no moon. What a chance for us could we make our escape tonight. There may never again happen such a chance for us. How goes Robin?" And so after a little more talk we lay down in our hammocks, and I, for one, fell instantly asleep, having no fear at all for Alice. First, because the master would be now at the bridge, feasting and too drunk for anything but to sleep. And next, because she had with her the woman Deb, as stout and lusty as any man. The master was not at the bridge with the rest of the planters and gentlemen. Perhaps the drink which he took in the morning caused him to forget the great banquet. However that may be, he was, most unluckily for himself, drinking at home and alone, yet dressed in his best coat and wig, and with his sword, all of which he had put on for the governor's banquet. After a while the devil entered into him, finding easy admission, so to speak, all doors thrown wide open, and even a welcome in that debauched and profligate soul. About 8 o'clock, therefore, prompted by the evil one, the master rose and stealthily crept out of the house. It was a dark night, but he needed no light to guide his footsteps. He crossed the court and made straight for the sick house. He pushed the door open and stood for a little, looking within. By the light of the horn lanthorn, he saw the girl whose image was 296 in his mind. The sight might have caused him to return, repentant and ashamed. For she was on her knees, praying aloud beside the bedside of the sick man. As he stood in the door, the woman named Deb, who lay upon the floor asleep, woke up and raised her head. But he saw her not. Then she sat up, watching him with suspicion. But his eyes were fixed on the figure of Alice. Then she sprang to her feet, for now she knew that mischief was meant, and she stood in readiness, prepared with her great strong arms to defend her mistress. But he thought nobody was in the house but Alice and the sick man. He saw nothing but the girl at the bedside. I say that I was sleeping. I was awakened at the sound of a shriek. I knew the voice. I sprang from the hammock. "God of mercy," I cried, "it is Alice, Barnaby, awake. Awake, I say, it is the cry of Alice." Then I rushed to the sick house. There I saw Alice, shrieking and crying for help, and before her the master struggling and wrestling with the woman Deb. She had her arms round his neck and made as if she was trying to throttle him. Nay, I think that she would have throttled him, so strong she was and possessed of such a spirit, and by the light of the lanthorn gleaming upon the blade, I saw that his sword had either fallen from his hand or from the scabbard, and now lay upon the floor. "Stand back," cried Barnaby, pushing me aside. "Leave go of him, woman, let me deal with him." The thing was done in a moment. Merciful heavens, to think that thus suddenly should the soul of man be called to its account. I had seen the poor fellows shot down and cut to pieces on Sedgemoor, but then they knew that they were going forth to fight and so might be killed. There was time before the battle for a prayer. But this man had no time, and he was more than half drunk as well. He lay at our feet, lifeless, Barnaby standing over him with a broken sword in his hand. For a while no one spoke or moved. But the woman called Deb gasped and panted and even laughed, as one who is well pleased because she hath had her revenge. Then Madame herself, clad in a long white nightdress and with bare feet, suddenly pushed us aside and fell upon her knees beside the wounded man. She lifted his head, the face was pale and the eyes closed. She laid it gently down and looked round. "You have killed him," she said, speaking not in a rage or passion but quietly. "You have killed him. Tomorrow you will hang, you will all hang." We said nothing. "Doctor," she turned to me, "tell me if he is dead or living." She snatched the lanthorn and held it while I made such examination as was possible. I opened his waistcoat and laid back 297 his shirt. The sword had run straight through him and broken off short, perhaps by contact with his ribs. The broken point remained in the wound, and the flesh had closed around it, so that, save for a drop of blood or two oozing out, there was no flow. It needs no great knowledge to understand that, when a man hath 6 inches of steel in his body which cannot be pulled out, and when he is bleeding inwardly, he must die. Still, as physicians use, I did not tell her so. "Madam," I said, "he is not dead, he is living. While there is life, there is hope." "Oh," she cried, "why did he buy you when he could have had the common sort? You will hang every one." "That shall we presently discover," said Barnaby. "Humphrey, we have now no choice left. What did I tell thee about the chances of the night? We must go this night. As for this villain, let him bleed to death." "Go," said Madame. "Whither, unhappy men, will you go? There is no place in the island where you can hide, but with bloodhounds they will have you out. You can go nowhere in this island, but you will be found and hanged, unless you are shot like rats in a hole." "Come, Humphrey," said Barnaby. "We will carry Robin. This poor woman must go too. She will else be hanged for trying to throttle him. Well, she can lend a hand to carry Robin. Madam, by your leave we will not hang, nor will we be shot. In the cave that I know of, your bloodhounds will never find us." "Madam," I said, "it is true that we shall attempt to escape. For what hath happened I am truly sorry, yet we may not suffer such a thing as was this night attempted without resistance, else should we be worse than the ignorant blacks. The master will perhaps live and not die. Listen and take heed therefore." "Doctor," she said, "do not leave me, stay with me or he will die. Doctor, stay with me and I will save your life. I will swear that you came at my call. Stay with me, I will save Alice as well. I will save you both. You shall be neither flogged nor hanged, I swear it. I will say that I called you for help when it was too late. Only this man and this woman shall hang. Who are they? A rogue and—" Barnaby laughed aloud. "Doctor," she said, "if you stay he will perhaps recover and forgive you all." Barnaby laughed again. "Madam," I told her, "better death upon the gallows than any further term of life with such a man." "Oh," she cried, "he will die where he is lying." "That may be, I know not." I gave her certain directions, bidding her, above all, watch the man, and cause him to lie perfectly quiet and not to speak a word, even in a whisper, and to give him a few drops of cordial from time to time. "Come," said Barnaby, "we lose time which is precious. Madam, if your husband recover, and for my part I care nothing whether he recover or whether he die. But if he should recover, tell him from me, Captain Barnaby Aiken, that I shall very likely return to this island, and that I shall then, the Lord helping, kill him in fair duello to wipe out the lash of the cudgel which he was good enough once to lay about my head. If he dies of this trifling thrust with his own sword, he must lay that to the account of my sister." "Enough," said Barnaby. "We will now make our way to the woods and the cave." This said, Barnaby went to the head of Robin's bed and ordered Deb to take the foot, and so between them they carried him forth with them, while Alice followed and I went last. We heard, long afterwards, through one Mr. Anstis, the same young gentleman who loved Alice and would have married her, what had happened when we were gone. An hour or thereabouts afterwards, Madame woke up one of the overseers, telling him what had happened, and bidding him be ready at daybreak with the bloodhounds, horses, and loaded guns, to follow in pursuit and bring us back. There would be, they thought, no difficulty at all in catching us, because we were encumbered by a sick man and 2 women. There was, however, more difficulty than they expected, for the footsteps led the bloodhounds to the seashore, and here the trace was lost, nor could it ever be afterwards recovered. And though the hue and cry was out over all the island, and the woods and the ravines and caves where runaway Negroes hide were searched, we were never found. Therefore, since no boat at all was missing, the Guineaman had sailed away, it was certain that we could not have escaped by sea. It was fortunate, indeed, that Barnaby dropped no hint about the sea. Otherwise, there would have been dispatched some of the boats of the port in search of us, and in that case, the scuttling of the ship might have been necessary. For, had we been caught, we should certainly have been hanged for murder, after being flogged for attempted escape. For the master died. He lay speechless until the day broke. Then he became conscious, and presently breathed his last in great anguish of body and terror of mind. What hath since become of Madam, and of that miserable family of servants and slaves, I know not. Certain it is that they could not find a more barbarous or a more savage master in place of him, whom Barnaby slew if they were to search the whole of the Spanish Main and the islands upon it. Chapter 46. A Perilous Voyage. And I end this way, unexpected and tragical, arrived our chance of escape. We walked to Carlisle Bay by way of the seashore, so that we might be met by none, and in order that the bloodhounds, if they should use them in the morning, might be thrown off the track. On the march that stout and lusty wench who carried one end of the bed neither called for a halt nor complained of the burden she carried all the way. It was nigh unto midnight when we arrived at the creek in which the boat lay sunk. This was within a stone's throw of John Nuttall's cottage, where were bestowed the mast, sails, oars, and gear, with such provisions as he had got together for the voyage. The man was sleeping when Barnaby called him, but he quickly got up, and in less than an hour we had the boat hauled out of the water, the provisions hastily thrown in, the mast stepped, our sick man and the women placed in the bows, the stern and middle of the boat being encumbered with our provisions. We had pushed down the muddy and stinking creek. We had hoisted sail, and we were stealing silently out of Carlisle Bay under a light breeze. 3 or 4 ships were lying in the bay, but either there was no watch kept aboard, or, which is more probable, it was no one's business to hail a small sailboat going out, probably for fishing at dawn. Besides, the night was so dark that we may very well have escaped notice. However that might be, in a quarter of an hour we were well out at sea, beyond the reach of the guns of Carlisle Bay, no longer visible to the ships in port, and without any fear of being seen until daybreak. The wind, which sometimes drops altogether in the night, still continued favorable, though very light. "My lads," said Barnaby presently, drawing a long breath, "I verily believe that we have given them the slip this time. In the morning they may go forth, if they please, with their bloodhounds to hunt for us. Let them hunt. If any inquiry is made for us at the bridge, no boat will be missing, and so no suspicion will be awakened. They will then, I suppose, search for us among the caves and ravines of which I have heard, where there are hiding places in plenty, but no water to drink, so that the poor devils who run away and seek a refuge there are speedily forced to come out for water, and so are caught or shot down. Well, they will hunt 300 a long time before they find us. This boat makes a little water, but I think not much. If she proves watertight and the breeze holds, by daylight we should be well to the south of the island. Courage, therefore, all will be well yet. How goes Robin?" He was lying as easily as we could manage for him, one rug over him and another under him. Alice sat on one side of him, and the woman they called Deb on the other. Then, because the boat sometimes shipped a little water when she dipped in the waves, Barnaby rigged a tarpaulin round the bows to prevent this. But this was not till next day. Over the tarpaulin he made, out of a rug and a spare spar, a low tilt which, unless the weather grew bad, should shelter those 3 by night from dew and spray, and by day from the sun overhead and the glare and heat of the water. "Deb," he said softly, "art afraid?" "No, sir, not while my mistress is here," meaning Alice. "If we are taken, we shall all be flogged well nigh unto death, and very likely hanged as well." "I am not afraid, sir." "We may spring a leak," said Barnaby, "and so go all to the bottom and be devoured. Art not afraid to die?" "No, sir, not if I may hold my mistress by the hand, so that she may take me whither she goeth herself." "Good," said Barnaby. "As for me, I expect I shall have to go alone or with John Nuttall here. Well, there will be a goodly company of us. Go to sleep, my girl. In the morning we will serve around the first ration, with perhaps, if all be well, a dram of cordial." In the dim light of the stars I watched all night the 3 figures in the bow. Robin lay white and motionless. Alice sat, covered with her hood, bending over him, and Deb, from whose head her coif had fallen, lay, head on arm, sound asleep. She had no fear, any more than a common soldier has when he goes into action, because he trusts his captain. Thus began our voyage, in an open boat 20 feet long, with a company of 3 sound men, 2 women, and a sick man. For arms, in case we needed them, we had none at all. If any ship crossed our track and should call upon us to surrender, we could not deny that we were escaped convicts, because the dress of all but one proclaimed the fact. Who, in such a climate, would choose to wear a coarse shirt and canvas breeches, with a Monmouth cap, except it was a servant or a slave who had no choice, but must take what is given him. But we should not surrender, come what might. If we could neither fight nor fly, we could sink, said Barnaby in the dead of night, whispering in my ear. Lad, T's agreed between us, we will have that clear. Sooner than be taken, we will scuttle the ship and so sink all together. If T's accounted murder, the blame shall lie between us. A little before daybreak the breeze freshened, and the waves began to rise, but not so high as to threaten the boat, which proved, indeed, a most gallant little craft, dancing over the waters as if she enjoyed being driven by the breeze. Some boats, as sailors will tell you, being always apt to compare these craft with living creatures, come thus frolic and sprightly from their makers' hands, while others, built of the same material and on the same lines, are, on the contrary, and always remain heavy and lumpish, just as some children are lively and gay, while others, born of the same parents, are dull and morose. Then the sun rose, seeming to leap out of the water, a most glorious ball of fire, which instantly warmed the cool air and began to burn and scorch our hands and faces. In these hot latitudes one understands what the ancients meant when they spoke of the dreadful sun god, who both gives and destroys life, and is so beneficial and yet so terrible. We, who live in a cold country, are sometimes greatly comforted by the sun, but are never burned. We feel his warmth but understand not his power. Then Barnaby began to gaze curiously all round the horizon. We had no glass or telescope, but his eyes were to him as good as any telescope is to most men. Thank the Lord, he said, drawing breath. It was rare for Barnaby thus openly to give praise. There is no sail in sight. To be sure, we have the day before us. But yet here he began to talk as some men use when they desire to place before their own minds clearly the position of affairs. Very well, then Barbados laying 30 miles and more northeast by north, vessels bound for the island from Bristol commonly sailing round the north. Very well, then, we are out of their track. Yet, then again, some are driven south by stress of weather. Aye, there is our danger. Yet again, if one should see us, would she bear down upon us? I greatly doubt it. The wind will continue, that is pretty sure. If they were to discover that we had gone by boat, would they sail after us? Why, what boat could they send, and whither would they steer? And what boat have they that can sail faster than this little craft? Yet we are pretty low down in the water. Humphrey, lad, he turned upon me his broad and sunburnt face full of cheerfulness. We are not within many hours of scuttling yet. A tight boat, a fair wind, a smooth sea. Let us hope for the best. How goes Robin? There was no change in Robin, either for better or for worse. Sis, said Barnaby, art sleeping still, sis, wake up and let us eat and drink and be jolly. What, Alice, I say, why we have escaped, we are far away at sea, let us laugh and sing. If there were room in this cockle, I would dance also. She lifted her head and threw back her hood. Ah, what a mournful face was there. Oh, brother, she said, canst thou laugh and sing? Hast thou forgotten last night? Why, no, he replied. One must not forget last night because it was the night of our escape. All else, I own, I can forget. Let it not stick in thy gizzard, my dear, that the man frightened thee. Rejoice rather that he thus afforded me a chance of giving him a taste of his own cold iron. Nay, brother, she said, shaking her head, then she looked round her. We are a long way from the land, she said. When will they send out a ship to bring us back? Why, d'ye see, Barnaby replied. Give us 12 hours more, and they may send out all their fleet if they have one, and sail the wide world round for us, and yet not capture us. And now let us overhaul the provisions and examine the ship's stores. Alice pulled her hood down again and said no more. The woman they called Deb was now wide awake and staring about her with the greatest satisfaction. Come, John Nuthall, Barnaby went on, we are hungry and thirsty. Where is the list I made for thee? Thou art our purser, our supercargo, our cook, and our steward. Thou art also bosun and carpenter and half the crew. Where is my list, I say? Give it me, and we will examine our stores. Look up, sis, never cry over what is done and over. What? A villain hath received a lesson, and thou hangest thy head therefore. Look up, I say. There is now hope for all, thou shalt merrily dance at my wedding yet. Then he read the list, and examined each parcel or box with great care. 150 of bread, a soft cheese, plantains, a keg of water 9 gallons, 6 bottles of canary, not one broken, a compass, a half-hour glass, a spare rug, 'tis over Robin's legs, flint and steel, a bit of tarpaulin, a hatchet and hammer, a saw, some nails, a spar or two, a coil of rope and yarn, a lump of tobacco. We can chew it, though I would rather put it into a pipe. Candles? Faugh! They are run together in a lump, they will serve to cock something presently. We had, in fact, no light during our voyage, but the tallow proved useful when, I think it was the next day, the boat started a leak. This was all our store. 'Twas not much for 6 people, but Barnaby hoped that the voyage would be short. If he should be disappointed, who would not put up with short rations for a day or two for the sake of freedom? And now, he said, when everything was stowed according to his mind, we will have breakfast. Our provisions are no great things, but after the accursed loblolly, a bit of bread and cheese will be a feast. A feast indeed it was, and our captain gratified us further by opening a flask of canary, which raised all our hearts. Strange that men should be able to recover their spirits, which should be independent of the creature comforts, by a dram of wine. As for Barnaby, I thought he would have kissed the bottle. It is now 3 months and more, he said, that we have had nothing save a sup of kill devil fresh from the still, and now we are mercifully permitted to taste again a glass of canary. Tea's too much, he sighed, drinking his ration. Well, we have but a few bottles, and the voyage may be longer than we hope, therefore we must go upon short allowance. But fear not, sis, there shall always be enough for Robin, poor lad. He then proceeded to tell us what he intended, and whither he would steer. We have no chart, he said. What then? I can draw one as good as they are made to steer by in these seas. He could not draw one because he had no paper or pencil, but he carved one with the point of his knife on the seat and marked out our course upon it day by day. See, he said, here is Barbados. Our course all night hath been Sue-West. She now makes 5 knots an hour. It is now 8, I take it, and we must therefore be about 40 miles from Barbados. Tomorrow morning we should make the Grenadillos, which are 150 miles from Carlisle Bay. Hark ye, there may be a Bristol vessel sailing from Great Grenada to Barbados, or the other way. That would be the devil, but such ships are rare, and there is no trade between the two islands. Well, we shall give Grenada as wide a berth as may be. Here he considered a little. Therefore, 'twill be our wiser plan to bear more to the south. Once south of Grenada, I take it, there will be no more danger. Off the main of South America, the sea is covered with islands. They are no man's land. Inhabitants have they none. Navigators, for the most part, know them not. English, French, and Spanish ships come never to these islands. My purpose, therefore, is to put in at Great Margaritos or Tortuga for rest and fresh water, and so presently make the Dutch island of Curaçao. And after that, then, my lad, we shall take ship to some country where a sailor may get a berth, and a physician may find patients. It must be to Holland first, but never fear, we shall get back to England some time, and perhaps fight another battle with a different tale to tell afterwards. As the day advanced, the coast of Barbados continually receded, until, before sunset, the island lay like a purple cloud low down in the horizon. The northeast breeze blew steadily, but the sun caused a most dreadful heat in the air, and our eyes smarted from the glare of the water and the spray that was blown upon us. It was at this time that Barnaby constructed the tilt of which I have spoken. The sea lay spread out round us in a broad circle, of which we were the center, and the cloudless blue sky lay over us like unto a roof laid there for us alone. It is only in a ship one doth feel thus alone, in the center of creation, even as if there were nothing but the sea around, the sky above, and our boat in the center. Thus must the patriarch Noah have felt when his ark floated upon the vast face of the water, and even the tops of the 3, 4 high hills were hidden and covered over. All day Barnaby scanned the horizon anxiously, but there came into sight no sail or ship whatever. To us, who sometimes see the vessels lying in a crowded port, and hear how they bring argosies from every land, it seems as if every part of the ocean must be covered with sails, driving before the wind from whatever quarter it may blow. But he who considers the mappa mundi will presently discover that there are vast expanses of sea where never a sail is seen, unless it be the fugitive sail of the pirate or the bark canoe of the native. We were now nearing such a lonely sea or part of the ocean. Barnaby knew, what these planters did not, how to steer across the unknown water to a port of safety beyond. At midday our captain served out another drink of water, and to Robin I gave a sop of bread in canary, which he seemed to suck up and to swallow with readiness. In such a voyage, where there is nothing to do but to keep the ship on her course and to watch the horizon for a strange sail, one speedily falls into silence, and sits many hours without speech, sometimes falling asleep, lulled by the ripple of the water as the boat flies through it. I have said nothing about the man John Nuthall. He was a plain, honest-looking man, and we found him throughout all this business faithful, brave, and patient, obedient to Barnaby, and of an even temper and contented with his share. That he had formerly been a thief in his native country cannot be denied, but I hope that we shall not refuse to any man the right of repentance. Barnaby divided the crew, namely himself, John Nuthall, and me, into 3 watches of 8 hours each, of which each man kept 2 at a stretch. Thus, beginning the day at noon, which was the only time we knew for certain, Barnaby would himself, but this was after the first 2 days, lie down and sleep till sunset or a little later. Then John Nuthall lay down and took his turn of sleep till Barnaby thought it was 2 o'clock in the morning, when he woke him and I took his place. But for the first day or two Barnaby slept not at all, and the whole of the voyage he slept as a good watchdog sleeps, namely, with one eye open. At sunset he gave out another pannikin of cold water to each of us, a ration of bread and cheese, and a dram of wine. Then he commanded John Nuthall to lie down and sleep, while I took the tiller and he himself held the ropes. Then the night fell once more upon us. Presently, while we sat there in silence, Alice rose up from her seat and came aft and sat down beside me. "Humphrey," she whispered, "think you that he is truly dead?" She was speaking, not of Robin, but of the master. "I know not, my dear. I can think of nothing but of that man's sudden end, and of what may happen to us. Say something to comfort me, Humphrey. 305 You always had some good word to say, like manna for refreshment. My soul is low in the dust, I cannot even pray. Why, my dear, what could I say? 'Tis true that the man was struck down and that suddenly, and yet. To think that my brother, that Barnaby, should have killed him. Why, said Barnaby, if someone had to kill him, why not I as well as another? What odds who killed him? Oh, she said, that a man should be called away at such a moment, when his brain was reeling with wine and wicked thoughts. He was not dead, I told her, though I knew very well what would be the end, when we came away. Many a man recovers who hath had a sword thrust through the body. He may now be on the mend, who can tell? Yet I knew, I say, very well how it must have ended. Consider, my dear, he tempted the wrath of God, if any man ever did. If he is destroyed, on his own head be it, not on ours. If he recover, he will have had a lesson which will serve him for the rest of his life. If he doth not recover, he may have time left him for something of repentance and of prayer. Why, Alice, if we get safely to our port, we ought to consider the punishment of this sinner, which was in self-defense, as one may truly say, the very means granted by Providence for our own escape. How else should we have got away? How else should we have resolved to venture all, even to carrying Robin with us? All this, I repeat, I said to encourage her, because, if I know aught of wounds, a man bleeding inwardly of a sword thrust through his vitals would have short time for the collecting of his thoughts or the repentance of his sins, being as truly cut off in the midst of them as if he had been struck down by a thunderbolt. A man may groan and writhe under the dreadful torture of such a wound, but there is little room for meditation or for repentance. Then I asked her if she was in fear as to the event of the voyage. I fear nothing, she told me, but to be captured and taken back to the place whence we came, there to be put in prison and flogged. That is my only fear. Humphrey, we have suffered so much that this last shame would be too great for me to bear. Oh, to be tied up before all the men and flogged like the black women, 'twould kill me, Humphrey. Alice, I said very earnestly, art thou, indeed, brave enough to endure death itself rather than this last barbarity? Oh, death, death, she cried, clasping her hands. What is death to me who have lost everything? Nay, but consider, my dear. To die at sea? It means to sink down under the cold water out of the light of day, to be choked for want of air, perhaps to be devoured quick by sharks, to lie at the bottom of the water, the seaweed growing over your bones, to be rolled about by the troubled waves. Humphrey, these are old wives' tales. Why, if it had been lawful I would have killed myself long ago, but I must not lose heaven as well as earth. A brief pang it is to die, and then to be happy forever. What do I care whether the seaweed covers my bones or the cold clay? Oh, Humphrey, Humphrey, why should I care any longer to live? My dear, I said, if we escape in safety there may yet be happiness in store. No man knoweth the future. She shook her head. Happiness, I told her, doth not commonly come to man in the way which he most desires and prays. For if he doth obtain the thing for which he hath so ardently prayed, he presently finds that the thing bringeth not the joy he so much expected. Or it comes too late, as is the case often with honors and wealth, when one foot is already in the grave. I mean, my dear, that we must not despair because the thing which most we desired is taken from us. Perhaps we ought not to desire anything at all, except what the Lord shall provide. But that is a hard saying, and if men desired nothing it is certain they would no longer work. I talked thus at length to divert her mind from her troubles. To thee, poor child, I said, have been given afflictions many and great, the loss of godly parents, a husband whom thou must avoid, and the deprivation of earthly love. Yet, since thou art so brave, Alice, I will tell thee, I thought not to tell thee anything of this. What, Humphrey, what? Briefly, Alice, thou shalt not be taken alive. How, unless you kill me? We are agreed, my dear, Barnaby and I, that if we cannot escape any boats which may pursue us the boat shall be sunk, and so we shall all drown together. Indeed, Alice, I confess that I am not myself so much in love with life as to return to that captivity and intolerable oppression from which we have gotten away. Therefore, be assured, we will all drown rather than go back. Oh, she sighed, but with relief, now shall I fear nothing. I have not lost everything since I have thee still and Barnaby. Alas, my head has been so full of what Madam said that we should be certainly caught and all of us flogged. To be flogged, who would not rather die? She shivered and trembled. To be flogged, Humphrey, I could not bear the shame. She trembled and shivered as she repeated this confession of fear. Fear not, my dear, I said. There are those on the boat who love thee too well to suffer that extreme of barbarity. Put that fear out of thy mind. Think only that we may have to die, but that we shall not be taken. To die, indeed, is very likely our fate, for we have but a quarter of an inch of frail wood between us and the seas. If a storm should arise, we fill with water and go down. If the wind should drop, we should be becalmed, and so perish miserably of hunger and thirst, if Barnaby steer not aright. Humphrey, said Barnaby, fill not her innocent head with rubbish. 'Tis not the time of tornadoes, and there will be no storm. The wind at the season never drops, therefore we shall not lie becalmed. And as for my steering aright, why, with a compass, am I a lubber. Brother, she said, if I am not to be flogged, the rest concerns me little. Let us say no more about it. I am now easy in my mind. Robin sleeps, Humphrey. He hath slept since the sun went down, and this afternoon he looked as if he knew me. Also, he took the bread sopped in canary eagerly, as if he relished it. These seas, said Barnaby, are full of sharks. I knew not what he meant, because we were speaking of Robin. Sharks have got their senses as well as humans, he went on. Still, I understood him not. When a man on board a ship is going to die, the sharks find it out, and they follow that ship until he does die and is flung overboard. Then they devour his body and go away, unless there is more to follow. I have looked for sharks, and there are none following the boat. Wherefore, though I am not a doctor, I am sure that Robin will not die. I know not at all, I said, how that may be. There are many things believed by sailors which are superstitions, fond beliefs nourished by the continual presence of perils. On the other hand, the senses of man are notoriously as far below those of creatures as his intellect is above them. Yet a skilful man may read the premonition of death in a sick man's face. Therefore I know not but a shark may have a sense, like unto the eye of a hawk, or the scent of a hound, with which to sniff the approach of death afar off. Let us comfort ourselves, Alice, with Barnaby's assurance. 'Tis a well-proved and tried thing, said Barnaby. And sailors, let me tell thee, Master Doctor, have no superstitions or idle beliefs. Well, that may be. As to Robin's disease, I can pronounce nothing upon it. Nay, had I the whole library of Padua to consult, I could learn nothing that would help me. First, the mind falls into a languishing and spiritless condition. That causeth the body to lie open to attacks of any disease which may be threatening. Then, the body, being ill at ease, works upon the mind and causes it to wander beyond control, so that the soul, which is bound up with body and mind, cannot show herself or manifest her will. It is the will which shows the presence of the soul, the will which governs body and mind alike. But if I know aught of disease, if a change comes upon Robin, it will either swiftly cure or swiftly kill. Humphrey, she whispered, if he recover, how shall I meet his face? How shall I reply when he asks me concerning my faith? My dear, he knows all. 'Twas that knowledge, the pity of it 308 and the madness of it, believe me, which threw him into so low a condition. I have looked daily for reproaches in thy kind eyes, Humphrey. I have found none, truly, but from Robin, oh, I dare not think of meeting those eyes of his. Reproach thee will he never, Alice. Sorrow and love, I doubt not, will lie in his eyes all his life. What thou hast done was for him, and for thy father and thy brother, and for all of us. But, oh, the pity and the villainy! Fear not to meet the poor lad's eyes, Alice. I long to see the light of reason in those dear eyes, and yet I fear. Humphrey, I am married, but against my will. I am a wife, and yet no wife. I am resolved that, come what may, I will never, never go to my husband. And I love my Robin still. Oh, she sobbed, I love my Robin still. If we die, I told her, you shall go down with your arm round his neck, and so you shall die together. Then we sat silent a while. My dear, I said, lie down and take some sleep. I cannot sleep, Humphrey, for the peace of mind which hath fallen me upon. If Robin now come to his senses again, I shall not fear him. And the night, it is so peaceful, so cool and so peaceful. The wind had dropped till there was barely enough to fill the sail, and only enough way on the boat to make a soft murmur of the water along her sides. The sea is so smooth. The sky is so bright and so full of stars. Can there be anywhere a peace like this? Alas, if we could sail still upon a silent and peaceful ocean, but we must land somewhere. There will be men, and where there are men there is wickedness, with drink and wrath and evil passions, such as we have left behind us. Humphrey, oh my brother Humphrey, it would be sweet if the boat would sink beneath us now, and so, with Robin's hand in mine, we could all go together to the happy land, where there is neither marrying nor giving in marriage. From beneath the tilt there came a voice. I verily believe it was an answer sent straight from heaven to comfort this poor faithful soul. Alice, it was the voice of Robin, in his right mind at last. Alice, he said, we will continue to love each other, yet without sin. Oh, Robin, Robin, she moved quickly to his side and fell upon her knees. Robin, thou wilt recover. Stay, I interposed. Robin will first have a cup of cordial. I have been sleeping, he said. I know not what hath happened. We are in a boat, it seems, and on the open sea. Unless I am still dreaming, we are slaves to a planter in Barbados, and this is Alice, who was in England, and I know not what it means. You have been ill, Robin, I told him. You have been nigh unto death. Many things have happened of which we will speak 309, but not now. Alice is at your side, and Barnaby is navigating the boat. Drink this cup of wine, so sleep now, and in the morning, if it please heaven, you shall be so strong that you shall hear everything. Ask no more questions, but sleep. Give him your hand, Alice. She obeyed me, sitting at his side and taking his hand in hers, and so continued for the rest of the night, Robin sleeping peacefully. In a word, he was restored. The fresh sea breeze brought him back to life and reason, and, though he was still weak, he was now as sound in his mind as any man could desire to be. And in the morning we told him all that had been done, whereat he marveled. Alice might love him still. That was most true, yet between them stood her husband. Why, there was another man in the boat who also loved a girl he could never wed. His passion, I swear, was full of constancy, tenderness, and patience. Would Robin be as patient? When the day broke again, we were still sailing over a lonely sea, with never a sail in sight and never a sign of land. And now Robin was sitting up, his face pale and his hands thin. But the light of reason was in his eyes, and on his lips such a smile of tenderness as we were wont to see there in the days of old. Said I not, cried Barnaby, that he would recover? Trust the sharks for common sense. And again an open sea with never a sail in sight, praise the Lord therefore. But Alice, when the sun rose above the waves, threw back her hood and burst forth into singing. O Lord, how glorious is thy grace, and wondrous large thy love. At such a dreadful time and place, to such as faithful prove. The tears came into my eyes only to see the change that had fallen upon her gracious, smiling countenance. It was not, truly, the sweet and happy face that we remembered before her troubles fell upon her, but that face graver with the knowledge of evil and of pain. And now it was like unto such a face as one may see in many an altarpiece in Italy, glorified with gratitude and love. Then the woman called Deb fell to weeping and blubbering for very joy that her mistress looked happy again. 'Twas a faithful, loving creature. Humphrey, said Alice, forgive me that I murmured. Things that are done cannot be undone. Robin is restored to us, with 3 such brothers who should not be content to live. I hope now that we shall get safely to our port, but if we die, we shall die contented in each other's arms. Going through the vale of misery, she added softly, we will use it as a well. Chapter 47. Tortuga. And I take it, said Barnaby, on the 3rd morning, the weather continuing fine and the sea clear of ships, that we are now clear out of the track of any British vessels. We may fall into the hands of the Spaniard, but he is mild and merciful of late compared with his temper 100 years ago. 'Tis true we have given him many lessons in humanity. We should now before nightfall make the islands of Testigos, but I think they are only rocks and sandy flats, such as they call keys, where we need not land, seeing that we should get nothing by so doing, except to go out of the way, and so make the rations shorter. Robin, 'twas at breakfast, when he served out a dram of wine to everyone, I drink to thy better health, lad. Thou hast cheated the devil. Nay, sis, look not so angry. I meant thou wilt not go to heaven this bout. Up heart then and get strong. We will find thee another sweetheart, who shall make thee lift up thine head again. What? Is there but one woman in the world? I was saying then, he went on, that we shall presently make the islands of Testigos. There followeth thereafter, to one who steereth west, a swarm of little islands. 'Twas here that the pirates used to lie in the good old days, snug and retired with their girls and their drink. Aye, and plenty of both, a happy time they had. Barnaby wagged his head and sighed. South of this archipelago, which I will some day visit, in order to search for treasure, there lieth the great and mountainous island of Margaritos. This great island we shall do well to keep upon our south, and so bear away to the desert island of Tortuga, where we shall find water for certain. And that, I have been told, the best spring water that flows. Turtles we may also find, and fish we may catch. And when we have recovered our strength, with a few days' rest ashore, we will once more put to sea and make for the island of Curaçao and the protection of the Dutchmen. It needs not to tell much more about the voyage, in which we were favored by heaven with everything that we could desire. A steady breeze from the best quarter, a sea never too rough, provisions in sufficiency, the absence of any ships, and above all, the recovery of Robin. I say then that we sighted, and presently passed, the group of islets called the Testigos, that we coasted along the great island of Margaritos, where we landed not, because Barnaby feared that certain smoke which we saw might betoken the presence of the Spaniard, whom, in spite of his new character for mildness, he was anxious to avoid. 'Tis strange thus to sail along the shore of a great island whereon are no inhabitants, or, if any, a few sailors put in for water, for turtle, and for coconuts. To see afar off the forests climbing round the mountain sides, the waterfalls leaping over the precipices, and to think of the happy life one might lead in such a place, far from men and their ways. I confess, since my mistress will never see this page, that my thoughts for a whole day, while we sailed along the shores of Margaritos, turned upon those pirates of whom Barnaby spoke. They lived here at ease and in great happiness. 'Tis of such a life that a man sometimes dreams. But if he were suffered so to lie in sloth, farewell heaven, farewell future hopes, farewell our old talk of lifting the soul above the flesh. Let us henceforth live the lives of those who are content, since they can have no more, with a few years of love and wine and revelry. It is in climates like that of the West Indies that such a temptation seizes on men the most strongly. For here everything is made for man's enjoyment. Here is no cold, no frost, no snow or ice. Here eternal summer reigns, and the world seems made for the senses and for nothing else. Of these confessions enough. 'Twas impossible that in such a luxurious dream the image of Alice could have any part. We landed, therefore, on the desert island of Tortuga, where we remained for several days, hauling up our boat and covering her with branches to keep off the sun. Here we lived luxuriously upon turtle, fresh fish, the remains of our bread, and what was left of our canary, setting up huts in which we could sleep, and finding water of the freshest and brightest I ever saw. Here Robin mended apace, and began to walk about with no more help from his nurses. We were minded, as I have said, to sail as far as the island of Curaçao, but an accident prevented this. One day, when we had been ashore for 10 days or thereabouts, we were terrified by the sight of a small vessel, rigged in the fashion of a ketch, that is, with a small mizzen, beating about outside the bay which is the only port of Tortuga. She will put in here, said Barnaby. That is most certain. Now, from the cut of her she is of New England build, and from the handling of her she is undermanned, and I think that we have nothing to fear from her, unless she is bound for Barbados, or for Grenada or Jamaica. Presently the vessel came to anchor, and a small boat was lowered, into which 3 men descended. They were unarmed. She is certainly from New England, said Barnaby. Well, 312, they are not from Barbados in quest of us, otherwise they would not send ashore 3 unarmed men to capture 4 desperate men. That is certain. And as we cannot hide our boat, though we might hide ourselves, I will e'en go forth and parley with these strangers. This he did, we watching from a safe place. The conversation was long and earnest, and apparently friendly. Presently Barnaby returned to us. There offers, he said, a chance which is perhaps better than to make for Curaçao, where, after all, we might get scurvy treatment. These men, in a word, are privateers, or, since we are at war with none, they are pirates. They fitted out a brigantine or bylander, I know not which, and designed to sail round Cape Horn to attack the Spaniard on the South Seas. On the way they took a prize, which you now see in the bay. 10 men were sent aboard to navigate her as a tender to their ship. But they fell into bad weather off Brazil, and their ship went down with all hands. Now they are bound for Providence, only 7 hands left, and they will take us aboard and carry us to that island for our services. Truly, I think we should go. They have provisions in plenty, with Madeira wine, and Providence is too far for the arm of King James to reach. What say ye all? Alice, what sayest thou? Truly, brother, I say nothing. Then we will agree and go with them. We went on board, taking with us a good supply of turtle, clear water, and coconuts, being all that the isle afforded. Honest fellows we found our pirates to be. They belonged to the island of Providence, in the Bahamas, which has long been the rendezvous of English privateers. 10 years before this, the Spaniards plucked up courage to attack and destroy the settlement, when those who escaped destruction found shelter in some of the adjacent islands, or on the mainland of Virginia. Now some of them have come back again, and this settlement, or colony, is re-established. Thither, therefore, we sailed. It seemed as if we were become a mere shuttlecock of fortune, beaten and driven hither and thither upon the face of the earth. Chapter 48. The Island of Providence. And it was some time in the month of March, AD 1686, that we landed in Providence. The settlement, from which the Spaniards had now nothing to fear, then consisted, it is now, I learn, much larger, of no more than 150 people in all, the men being all sailors, and ready to carry on again the old trade of privateer or pirate, as you please to call it, when they should be strong enough to buy or hire a ship and to equip her. We stayed on the island for 2 years and a quarter, or thereabouts. It is one of an archipelago, for the most part, I believe, desert. The settlement was, as I have said, but a small one, living in scattered houses. There were plenty of these to spare, which had belonged to the former settlement, if one only took the trouble to clear away the creeping plants and cut down the trees which had grown up round them since the Spaniards came, and destroyed the colony. Such a house, built of wood, with a shingle roof, we found convenient for us, and after we had cleared the ground round it and repaired it, we lived in it. Some of the people helped us to a porker or two and some chickens. They also gave us some salt beef and maize to start with. That we had little money, only what was left over from the sale of Alice's ring, made no difference to us here, because no one had any at all, and at this time there was neither buying nor selling on the island. A happy condition of things which will not, I take it, last long. So great is the fertility of the ground here, and such is the abundance which prevails, that we very shortly found ourselves provided with all that we wanted to make life pleasant. Work there was for us but easy and pleasant work, such as weeding our patches of vegetables and fruit in the early mornings, or going to fish, or planting maize, or attending to our pigs, poultry, and turkeys, and for the rest of the time, sitting in the shade conversing. It is none too hot in this place, though one would not in the summer walk abroad at noon, nor is it ever too cold. All the fruits which flourish under the tropics grow here, with those also which belong to the temperate zone. Here are splendid forests, where you can cut the mahogany tree and build your house, if you please, of that lovely wood. Here we ourselves 314 grew, for our own use, maize, tobacco, coffee, cocoa, plantains, pines, potatoes, and many other fruits and vegetables. Barnaby soon grew tired of this quiet life, and went on board a schooner bound for New England, promising that we should hear from him. After 2 years we did receive a letter from him, as you shall immediately learn. When he was gone we carried on a quiet and peaceful life. Books, paper, and pen there were none upon this island, nor were there any clothes, so that the raggedness of our attire, we were dressed in the sailors' clothes our friends the privateers gave us, became incredible. I made some kind of guitar on which we played, and in the evening we would have very good playing and singing together of such pieces and songs as we could remember. I made verses, too, for amusement, and Alice learned them. We found our brother settlers a rough but honest folk, to whom we taught many arts. How to procure sea salt, how to make wine from pineapples, how to cure the tobacco leaf, things which greatly added to their comfort. And seeing that there was no church on the island, we every Sabbath held a meeting for prayer and exhortation. Seeing then that we had all that man could desire, with perfect freedom from anxiety, our liberty, a delightful climate, plenty to eat and drink, aye, and of the very best, and that at home there was nothing for us but prison again, and to be sent back to the place whence we had escaped, we ought, everyone will acknowledge, to have felt the greatest contentment and gratitude for this sure and quiet refuge. We did not. The only contented members of our household were John Nuthall and the woman Deb, who cheerfully cultivated the garden and fed the poultry and the pigs, for we had now everything around us that is wanted to make life pleasant. Yet we were not contented. I could read the signs of impatience in the face whose changes I had studied for so long. Other women would have shown their discontent in ill temper and a shrewish tongue. Alice showed hers in silence, sitting apart, and communing with herself. I dare say I also showed my discontent, for I confess that I now began to long vehemently for books. Consider, it was more than 2 years since I had seen a book. There were no books at all on the island of Providence, not one book except a Bible or two, and perhaps a book of common prayer. I longed, therefore, for the smell of leather bindings, the sight of books on shelves, and the holy company of the wise and the ingenious. No one, again, could look upon Robin without perceiving that he was afflicted with a constant yearning for that which he could not have. What that was I understood very well, although he never opened his mind unto me. Now I confess that at this time I was grievously tormented with the thought that, Alice's marriage having been no true marriage, because first, she was betrayed and deceived, and next, she had left her husband at the very church porch. There was no reason in the world why she should not disregard that ceremony altogether 315 and contract a marriage after her own heart. I turned this over in my mind a long while, and, indeed, I am still of the opinion that there would have been nothing sinful in such an act. But the law of the country would not so regard it. That is quite true. If, therefore, I had advised these unhappy lovers in such a sense, they would have been compelled to live for the rest of their lives on this island, and their offspring would have been illegitimate. So that, though the letter of the law caused a most cruel injustice, summum jus summa injuria, it was better that it should be obeyed. In the end, it was a most happy circumstance that it was so obeyed. I have presently to relate the means by which this injustice was removed. As for my own share in it, I shall neither exaggerate nor shall I extenuate it. I shall not defend it. I will simply set it down, and leave judgment to a higher court than the opinion of those who read these pages. I must, however, acknowledge that, partly in Barbados and partly in Providence, I learned from the negresses, who possess many secrets and have a wonderful knowledge of plants and their powers, the simple remedies with which they treat fevers, agues, rheumatisms, and other common disorders. I say simple because they will, with a single cup of liquor boiled with certain leaves, or with a pinch of some potent powder gotten from a plant, effect a speedier cure than our longest prescriptions, even though they contain more than 50 different ingredients. Had I possessed this knowledge, for example, while we lay in Exeter jail, not one prisoner except the old and feeble should have died of the fever. This said, you will understand presently what it was I did. It was then, about the month of March, in the year 1688, that a ship, laden with wine, and bound from New York to Jamaica, put in at the port of Providence. Her captain carried a letter for me, and this was the first news of the world that came to us since our flight. The letter was from Barnaby. It was short because Barnaby had never practiced the art of letter writing, but it was pertinent. First, he told us that he had made the acquaintance at Boston, I mean the little town Boston of New England, of his cousins, whom he found to be substantial merchants. So that here, at least, the man George Penney lied not, and zealous upholders of the independent way of thinking, that these cousins had given him a hearty welcome for the sake of his father, that he had learned from them first that the Monmouth business was long since concluded, and so great was the public indignation against the cruelties of the bloody assize, that no one would again be molested on that account, not even those who had been sent abroad should they venture to return. He also said, but this we understood not, that it was thought things would before long improve. And now, he concluded, my cousins, finding that I am well skilled and have already navigated a ship with credit, have made me captain of their own vessel, the Pilgrim, which sails every year 316 to Bristol and back again. She will be dispatched in the month of August or September. Come, therefore, by the first ship which will set you ashore either at New York or at Boston, and I will give you all a passage home. Afterwards, if you find not a welcome there, you may come back with me. Here a physician may find practice, Robin may find a farm, and sister will be safe from BB. At this proposal, we pricked up our ears, as you may very well believe. Finally, we resolved to agree to it, promising each other to protect Alice from her husband, and to go back to Boston with Barnaby if we found no reason to stay in England. But the woman Deb, though she wept at leaving her mistress, would not go back to the place where her past wickedness might be remembered, and John Nuthall was also unwilling, for the same reason, to return, and, as this honest couple had now a kindness for each other, I advised them to marry and remain where they were. There was on the island no minister of religion, nor any magistrate or form of government whatever, yet all were honest. Therefore I ventured to hear their vows of fidelity, and prayed with them while I joined their hands, a form of marriage, to my mind, as binding and as sacred as any wanting the assistance of a priest. So we handed over to them all our property, which was already as much theirs as ours, and left them in that sunny and delightful place. If the man was a repentant thief, the woman was a repentant Magdalene, and so they were well matched. I hope and believe that, being well resolved for the future, they will lead a godly and virtuous life, and will be blessed with children who will never learn the reason why their parents left their native country. There is little trade at Providence, but many vessels touch at the port, because it lies between the English possessions in America and those in the West Indies. They put in for water, for fruit, and sometimes, if they are short-handed for men, most of them in the place being sailors. Therefore we had not to wait long before a vessel put in, bound from Jamaica to New York. We bargained with the captain for a passage, agreeing that he should find us provisions and wine, and that we would pay him, by means of Barnaby, on our reaching Boston, which is but a short distance from New York. Strange to say, though we had been discontented with our lot, when we sailed away Alice fell to weeping. We had murmured, and our murmuring was heard. We should now be permitted to live out what was left to us of life in England, and we should die and be buried among our own folk. Yet there are times when I remember the sweet and tranquil life we led in the island of Providence, its soft and sunny air, the cool sea breeze, the shade of its orange groves, and the fruits which grew in such abundance to our hands. Chapter 49. Tome. And I N one thing alone the villain Penne spoke the truth. The Aiken family of Boston, I say again of New England, was one of the most considerable in the place, great sticklers for freedom and for religion, but, indeed, it is a most God-fearing town, and severe towards transgressors. They received us with so much kindness that nothing could surpass it. We were treated as Christian martyrs at the least, and towards Alice, of whose cruel lot they had heard from Barnaby, they showed, but that no one could help, an affection quite uncommon. They generously furnished us all with apparel becoming our station, and with money for our daily occasions. They approved of our going with Barnaby. But, in the event of our finding no welcome or means of a livelihood at home, and if Alice should be molested by her husband, they engaged us to return to New England. Here, they said, Robin might become a farmer, if he had no inclination for trade. They would joyfully receive Alice to live with them, and I myself would certainly find practice as a physician, while Barnaby should continue to command their ship. When I considered the many conveniences which exist in Boston, it is already, though young, better provided with everything than Barbados, the excellence of the climate, the books which are there, the printing press which hath already been established, the learned ministers, the college, the schools, and the freedom of religion, I should have been nothing loth to remain there. But I was constrained first to go home. I found also, which astonished me, so great a love of liberty that the people speak slightingly of the English at home, who tamely suffer the disabilities of the nonconformists and the prerogative of the crown. And they ask why, when the country had succeeded in establishing a commonwealth, they could not keep it. It certainly cannot be denied, as they argue, that Israel acted against the declared will of the Lord in seeking a king. So we left them, but in how changed a condition did we now cross the ocean? Instead of huddling in a noisome and stinking dungeon, unclean for want of water, ill-fed, and with no change of raiment, we had now comfortable cabins, clothes such as become a gentleman, and food of the best. And Barnaby, who had then sat humbly in the waist, where the prisoners were confined, now walked the quarterdeck. A laced kerchief round his neck, lace ruffles at his wrist, a scarlet coat on his back, a sword at his side, and gold lace in his hat. The captain of the ship. The winds were contrary, and it was not until the last days of 3/18 October that we arrived at Bristol. Here we lay for a few days, while Barnaby transacted his business, resolving to remain in retirement, for fear of accidents, until our captain should be ready to ride with us to Bradford Orcas. The first news we learned was joyful indeed. It was that the Prince of Orange himself was about to invade England, with intent to drive his father-in-law from the throne. He had indeed already sailed, but his fleet was driven back by a storm. It was also stated that he had with him a great army of Dutch and English, and such preparations of arms and ammunition as it was hoped would make such a failure as that of our unhappy Duke impossible. We also confirmed Barnaby's information that Monmouth's men could now go about without fear or molestation. As to the position of affairs at Bradford Orcas, we could learn nothing. There was one point on which I was curious, namely, as to what Barnaby would do in the matter of the villain Penne. On the one hand, it was certain that Barnaby would not forget this man, nor was he likely to sit down with his arms folded after he had been robbed of so great a sum. Therefore, I was not surprised when, the evening before we rode out of Bristol, he brought a big bag of blue stuff in his hands and poured out the contents, a vast shower of gold pieces, into the lap of his astonished sister. Alice, he said, I bring you back your money. You will find it all here, and Mr. Bosquirrel's money to boot. He hath disgorged. With that he sat down and laughed, but as one who hath a joke in secret and would tell us no more. For a day or two after this he would, on the road to Bradford Orcas, begin to laugh at intervals, rolling about in his saddle, shaking his sides, choking with laughter, insomuch that I presently lost patience with him, and, as a physician, ordered him instantly to make full confidence, or I would not answer for it, but he would have a fit. Then he told us what he had done. Towards 5 in the afternoon, when the autumn day is ended, he repaired to the man Penne's counting-house, a place easily found on inquiry, having with him one of those fellows who bawl at fairs, selling medicines and charms, drawing teeth, letting blood, and so forth. At the sight of a sea captain, many of whom came to this place, the worthy merchant's servant, without suspicion, opened the door of the private office or chamber, where Mr. Penney transacted his affairs. Barnaby found him dozing by the fire, his wig on the table, a silk handkerchief over his head, and the candles already lighted. He awoke, however, on the opening of the door. "Friend," said Barnaby, "I am Captain Barnaby Aiken, commanding the ship Pilgrim from Boston at your service. I am also brother to the young woman Alice Aiken, whom you robbed. 'Twas my money of £250 and afterwards kidnapped." Pistol. Barnaby holding the pistol to the poor wretch's head, so that he should not bellow and call for assistance. Mr. Penney looked about him and would have cried out for assistance, but Barnaby clapped a pistol to his forehead. Then he sank in his chair and gasped. "Stir not," said his enemy. "I am also one of the 3 rebels for whose ransom the Reverend Philip Boscorel, rector of Bradford Orcas, paid the sum of £210, which you have also stolen." "Sir," said Mr. Penney, "upon my honor those moneys were sent to Barbados. Upon my honor, sir." "You will therefore," said Barnaby, taking no heed of this assurance, "pay over to me the sum of £460, with interest at 5%. For 3 years, which I have calculated, the whole amount is £529. Begin by paying this." Well, to make a long story short, though the man protested that he had not so much in the world, yet he presently opened his strong box and counted out the money, all in gold. This done, he hoped to be let off. "There now remains," said Barnaby, "the punishment, and I forgot sister's ring. I ought to have added £50 for that. But time presses. Perhaps I shall come back. I did intend to kill thee, brother, for thy great villainy. However—" He then beckoned the man with him, who lugged out of his pocket an instrument which made Mr. Penney shake and quake with terror. Barnaby then informed his victim that, as he had been the means of inflicting grievous bodily suffering upon 4 undeserving people, it was meet and right that he himself should experience something which, by its present agony, should make him compassionate for the future, and by its permanence of injury should prevent his ever forgetting that compassion for the rest of his life. He therefore, he told him, intended to draw from his head 4 of his stoutest and strongest grinders. This, in a word, he did, the man with him dragging them out with the pincers, Barnaby holding the pistol to the poor wretch's head so that he should not bellow and call for assistance. His laughter was caused by the remembrance of the twisting of the man's features in this agony, and by his moanings and groanings. The grinders he had brought away with him in his pocket, and showed them in triumph. It was late in the afternoon when we rode into Bradford Orcas. The November sun, now setting, lay upon the woods, yellow and red with the autumn leaves not yet fallen. As we neared the village, the sun went down, and a mist began to rise. All the doors were closed, and no one looked forth to greet us. The old cottage where Alice was born and where she lived so long was empty still. The door was open, the shutter hung upon one hinge, the honey hives were overturned, the thatch was broken, the garden was neglected. "Why, sis," said Barnaby, "thy mother is not there, nor dad is he. Poor old dad." We rode up the village till we came to the church and the 320 manor house beside it. Alas, the house itself was closed, which had formerly stood open to all. There was no smoke from its chimneys, and the grass grew in the courtyard. We dismounted and opened the door, which was not locked. We went into the house. All was cold and empty and deserted. The twilight falling outside made the rooms dark. Beside the fireplace stood Sir Christopher's great chair empty. His tankard was on the table and his tobacco pipe, and strange, there lay, forgotten, the unhappy Duke's proclamation. Then a truly wonderful thing happened. Barnaby says that I must have dreamed it, for he saw nothing. Suddenly Sir Christopher himself appeared sitting in the chair. On his knees lay the Bible open. Beside him stood, with upraised forefinger, as if commenting on some knotty point, the Rev. Dr. Comfort Aiken. I declare that I saw them plainly as I now behold the paper on which I write. They were but as shadows in the dark shadows of the empty room, and they appeared but for a moment, and then vanished, and I saw them no more. "Come to the rectory," said Robin. "It chokes us to be here." "Listen," said Alice, outside the house. From the rectory there came the sound of a violoncello. Then was the good rector himself there, comforting his soul. We opened the garden gate and walked softly across the lawn and looked in at the window. 'Twas made after the foreign fashion, to open upon the lawn. Beside the fire sat Madame, her hands clasped, thin, pale, and prematurely aged. Thus had she sat for 3 long years, still waiting for news of her son. The rector laid down his bow, crossed the room, and sat down to the spinet, on which he played prettily, but not with such command as he possessed over the other instrument. He played, I caught Alice's hand, an air of my own making to which I had set certain words also of my own. Then, while he played, we began to sing outside the window, Alice singing treble, or first, I the second part, and Robin the bass, as I had taught him in Providence Island the words of that little song. We sang it piano or softly at first, and then crescendo or louder. As rides the moon in azure skies, the twinkling stars beside, as when in splendor she doth rise, their lesser lights they hide. So beside Celia, when her face we see, all unregarded other maidens be. When we began, softly as I said, the rector looked round him, playing still and listening. He thought the voices were in his own brain, echoes or memories of the past. Madame heard them too, and sat up listening as one who listens in a dream. When we sang louder, Madame sprang to her feet and held out her arms, but the rector played the verse quite through. Then he opened the window for us. My son," cried Madame. Chapter 50. The Great Lord Chancellor. B. But the Prince of Orange had already landed. We learned this news next day, and you may be sure that we were in the saddle again and riding to Exeter, there to join his standard. This we did with the full consent of Madame and of Alice. Much as we had suffered already, they would not deter us, because this thing would have been approved by Sir Christopher and Dr. Aikin. Therefore we went. As all the world knows, this expedition was successful. Yet was not Barnaby made an admiral, nor was I made a court physician. We got, in fact, no reward at all, except that for Barnaby was procured a full pardon on account of the homicide of his late master. My second campaign, as everybody knows, was bloodless. To begin with, we had an army, not of raw country lads armed indifferently and untrained, but of veteran troops, 15,000 strong, all well equipped, and with the best general in Europe at their head. At first, indeed, such was the dread in men's minds caused by Lord Geoffrey's cruelties. Few came in. Yet this was presently made up by what followed, when, without any fighting at all, the king's regiments melted away, his priests fled, and his friends deserted him. This was a very different business from that other, when we followed one, whom I now know to have been a mere tawdry pretender, no better fitted to be a king than a vagabond actor at a fair is fit to be a lord. Alas, what blood was wasted in that mad attempt, of which I was myself one of the most eager promoters. I was then young, and I believed all that I was told by the conspirators in Holland. I took their list of well-wishers for insurgents already armed and waiting only for a signal. I thought that the roll of noble names set down for sturdy Protestants was that of men already pledged to the cause. I believed that the whole nation would rise at the first opportunity to turn out the priests. I even believed in the legitimacy of the Duke, and that against the express statement of his father, if King Charles was in reality his father. And I believed what they told me of his princely virtues, his knowledge of the art of war, and his heroic valor. I say that I believed all these things, and that I became a willing and zealous tool in their hands. As for what those who planned the expedition believed, I know not, nor will any 322 now ever learn what promises were made to the Duke, what were broken, and why he was, from the outset, save for a few days at Taunton, so dejected and disappointed. As for me, I shall always believe that the unhappy man, unwise and soft-hearted, was betrayed by those whom he trusted. It is now an old tale, though King Monmouth will not speedily be forgotten in the West Country, nor will the memory of the bloody assize. The brave lads who followed him are dead and buried, some in unhonored graves hard by the place where they were hanged, some under the burning sun of the West Indies. The Duke himself hath long since paid the penalty of his rash attempt. All is over and ended, except the memory of it. It is now common history, known to everybody, how the Prince of Orange lingered in the West Country, his army inactive, as if he knew, doubtless he was well informed upon this particular, that the longer he remained idle the more likely was the king's cause to fall to pieces. There are some who think that if King James had risked an action he could not but have gained, whatsoever its event. I mean that, the blood of his soldiers once roused, they would have remained steadfast to him and would have fought for him. But this he dared not to risk, wherefore the prince did nothing, while the king's regiments fell to pieces and his friends deserted him. It was in December when the prince came to Windsor, and I with him, once more chirurgeon in a rebel army. While there I rode to London, partly with the intention of judging for myself as to the temper of the people, partly because, after so long an absence, I wished once more to visit a place where there are books and pictures, and partly because there were certain notes and herbs which I desired to communicate to the College of Physicians in Warwick Lane. It happened to be the very day when the king's first flight, that namely, when he was taken in the Isle of Sheppey, became known. The streets in the city of London I found crowded with people hurrying to and fro, running in bands and companies, shouting and crying, as if in the presence of some great and imminent danger. It was reported and currently believed that the disbanded Irish soldiers had begun to massacre the Protestants. There was no truth at all in the report. But yet the bells were ringing from all the towers, the crowds were exhorting each other to tear down and destroy the Romish chapels, to hunt for and to hang the priests, and especially Jesuits. I know not whether they found any, and to shout for the Prince of Orange. I stood aside to let the crowds, thus religiously disposed, run past, but there seemed no end to them. Presently, however, this was in front of the new Royal Exchange, there drew near another kind of crowd. There marched 6 or 8 sturdy fellows bearing stout cudgels and haling along a prisoner. Round them there ran, shrieking, hooting and cursing, a mob of 100 men and more. They continually made attacks upon the guard, fighting them with sticks and fists, but they were always thrust back. I thought at first that they had 323 caught some poor, wretched priest whom they desired to murder, but it proved to be a prize worth many priests. As they drew nearer, I discerned the prisoner. He was dressed in the garb of a common sailor, with short petticoats, which they call slops, and a jacket. His cap had been torn off, leaving the bare skull, which showed that he was no sailor, because common sailors do not wear wigs. Blood was flowing down his cheek from a fresh wound. His eyes rolled hither and thither in an extremity of terror. I could not hear what he said for the shouting of those around him, but his lips moved, and I think he was praying his guards to close in and protect him. Never, surely, was seen a more terror-stricken creature. I knew his face. Once seen, I had seen it once, it could never be forgotten. The red and bloated cheeks, which even his fear could not make pale, the eyes, more terrible than have been given to any other human creature, these I could not forget, in dreams I see them still. I saw that face at Exeter, when the cruel judge exulted over our misery and rejoiced over the sentence which he pronounced. Yea, he laughed when he told us how we should swing, but not till we were dead, and then the knife, delivering his sentence so that no single point of its horror should be lost to us. Yes, it was the face of Judge Jeffreys. None other, this abject wretch was that great judge. Why, when we went back to our prison there were some who cast themselves upon the ground, and, for terror of what was to come, fell into mere dementia. And now I saw him thus humbled, thus disgraced, thus threatened, thus in the last extremity and agony of terror. They had discovered him, thus disguised and in hiding, at a tavern in Wapping, and were dragging him to the presence of the Lord Mayor. It is a long distance from Wapping to Guildhall, and they went but slowly, because they were beset and surrounded by these wolves who howled to have his blood. And all the way he shrieked and trembled for fear. Sure and certain is the vengeance of the Lord. This Hammon, this unjust judge, was thus suffering, at the hands of the savage mob, pangs far worse than those endured by the poor rustics whom he had delivered to the executioner. I say worse because I have not only read, but have myself proved, that the rich and the learned, those, that is, who live luxuriously, and those who have power to imagine and to feel beforehand, do suffer far more in disease than the common, ignorant folk. The scholar dies of terror before ever he feels the surgeon's knife, while the rustic bears his limb, insensible and callous, however deep the cut or keen the pain. I make no doubt, therefore, that the great Lord Chancellor, while they hailed him all the way from Wapping to Guildhall, suffered as much as 50 ploughboys flogged at the cart-tail. Many thousands there were who desired revenge upon him. I know not what revenge would satisfy the implacable, because revenge can do no more than kill the body, but his worst enemy 324 should be satisfied with this, his dreadful fate. Even Barnaby, who was sad because he could get no revenge on his own account, he wanted a bloody battle, with the rout of the king's armies and the pursuit of a flying enemy, such as had happened at Sedgemoor, was satisfied with the justice which was done to that miserable man. It is wonderful that he was not killed amidst so many threatening cudgels, but his guards prevented that, not from any love they bore him, but quite the contrary, more unforgiving faces one never saw, for they intended to hand him over to the Lord Mayor, and that he should be tried for all his cruelties and treacheries, and perhaps experience himself that punishment of hanging and disemboweling which he had inflicted on so many ignorant and misled men. How he was committed to the Tower, where he shortly died in the greatest torture of body as well as mind, everybody knows. Chapter 51. The Confession. Then, now am I come to the last event of this history, and I have to write down the confession of my own share in that event. For the others, for Alice and for Robin, the thing must be considered as the crown and completion of all the mercies. For me, what is it but you shall hear? When the secrets of all hearts are laid open, then will Alice hear it also, What she will then say, or what think, I know not. It was done for her sake, for her happiness have I laid this guilt upon my soul. Nay, when the voice of conscience doth exhort me to repent, and to confess my sin, then there still ariseth within my soul, as it were, the strain of a joyful hymn, a song of gratitude that I was enabled to return her to freedom and the arms of the man she loved. If any learned doctor of divinity, or any versed in that science which the Romanists love, they call it casuistry, should happen to read this chapter of confession, I pray that they consider my case, even though it will then be useless as far as I myself am concerned, seeing that I shall be gone before a judge who will, I hope, even though my earthly affections do not suffer me to separate my sin from the consequences which followed, be more merciful than I have deserved. While then I stood watching this signal example of God's wrath, I was plucked gently by the sleeve, and turning, saw one whose countenance I knew not. He was dressed as a lawyer, but his gown was ragged, and his bands yellow. He looked sunk in poverty, and his face was inflamed with those signs which proclaim aloud the habit of immoderate drinking. "Sir," he said, "if I mistake not, you are Dr. Humphrey Chally." "The same, sir, at your service," I replied with some misgivings. And yet, being one of the prince's following, there needed none. "I have seen you, sir, in the chambers of your cousin, Mr. Benjamin Bosquirrel, my brother learned in the law. We drank together, though, I remember, you still passed the bottle. It is now 4 or 5 years ago. I wonder not that you have forgot me. We change quickly, we who are the jolly companions of the bottle. We drink our noses red, and we paint our cheeks purple. Nay, we drink ourselves out of our last guinea, and out of our very apparel. What then, sir? A short life and a merry. Sir, yonder is a sorry sight. The first law officer of the crown thus to be hailed 326 along the streets by a howling mob. Ought such a thing to be suffered? 'Tis a sad and sorry sight, I say." "Sir," I replied hotly, "ought such villains as Judge Jeffreys to be suffered to live?" He considered a little, as one who is astonished and desires to collect his thoughts. Perhaps he had already taken more than a morning draught. "I remember now," he said. "My memory is not so good as it was. We drink that away as well. Yes, I remember. I crave your forgiveness, doctor. You were yourself engaged with Monmouth. Your cousin told me as much. Naturally you love not this good judge, who yet did nothing but what the king, his master, ordered him to do. I, sir, have often had the honor of sitting over a bottle with his lordship. When his infirmities allowed, though not yet old, he is grievously afflicted, he had no equal for a song or a jest, and would drink so long as any were left to keep him company. Ha, they have knocked him down, now they will kill him. No, he is again upon his feet, those who protect him close in. So they have passed out of our sight. Doctor, shall we crack a flask together? I have no money, unhappily, but I will with pleasure drink at your expense." I remembered the man's face now, but not his name. 'Twas one of Ben's boon companions. Well, if hard drinking brings men so speedily to rags and poverty, even though it be a merry life, which I doubt, give me moderation. "Pray, sir," I said coldly, "to have me excused, I am no drinker." "Then, doctor, you will perhaps lend me, until we meet again, a single guinea." I foolishly complied with this request. "Doctor, I thank you," he said. "Will you now come and drink with me at my expense? Sir, I say plainly, you do not well to refuse a friendly glass. I could tell you many things, if you would but drink with me, concerning my Lord Jeffreys. There are things which would make you laugh. Come, doctor, I love not to drink alone. Your cousin now was always ready to drink with any man, until he fell ill." "How is my cousin ill?" "Assuredly, he is sick unto death. Yesterday I went to visit him, thinking to drink a glass with him, and perhaps to borrow a guinea or two, but found him in bed and raving. If you will drink with me, doctor, I can tell you many curious things about your cousin. And now I remember you were sent to the plantations, your cousin told me so. You have returned before your time. Well, the king hath run away, you are, doubtless, safe. Your cousin hath got his grandfather's estate. Lord Jeffreys, who loved him mightily, procured that grant for him. When your cousin wakes at night, he swears that he sees his grandfather by his bedside looking at him reproachfully, so that he drinks the harder. 327 'Tis a merry life. He hath also married a wife, and she ran away from him at the church door, and he now cannot hear of her or find her anywhere, so that he curses her and drinks the harder. Oh, 'tis always the jolliest dog. They say that he is not the lawyer that he was, and that his clients are leaving him. All mine have left me long since. Come and drink with me, doctor." I broke away from the poor toper, who had drunk up his wits as well as his money, and hurried to my cousin's chambers, into which I had not thought to enter save as one who brings reproaches, a useless burden. Benjamin was lying in bed. An old crone sat by the fire, nodding. Beside her was a bottle, and she was, I found, half drunk. Her I quickly sent about her business. No one else had been attending him. Yet he was laid low, as I presently discovered, with that kind of fever which is bred in the villainous air of our prisons, the same fever which had carried off his grandfather. Perhaps, if there were no foul and stinking wards, jails, and clinks, this kind of fever would be banished altogether, and be no more seen. So, if we could discover the origin and cause of all diseases, we might once more restore man to his primitive condition, which I take to have been one free from any kind of disease or infirmity, designed at first by his Creator so to live forever, and, after the fall, enabled, when medicine shall be so far advanced, to die of old age after such prolongation of life and strength, as yet we cannot even understand. Cousin, I said, I am sorry to find thee lying in this condition. He replied in a voice weak and low, not like his old blustering tones. Curse me and upbraid me if thou wilt. How art thou come hither? Is it the ghost of Humphrey? Art thou dead like my grandfather? Are we on the plantations of Barbados? Indeed, I am no ghost, Benjamin. As for curses, I have none, and as for reproaches, I leave them to thy conscience. Humphrey, I am sore afflicted. I am now so low that I cannot even sit upright in my bed. But thou art a doctor. Thou wilt bring me back to health. I am already better only for seeing thee here. I declare that as yet I had no thought at all, of what I was to do. I was but a physician in presence of a sick man, and therefore bound to help him if I could. I asked him first certain questions, as physicians use, concerning his disorder and its symptoms. I learned that, after attending at the court, he was attacked by fits of shivering and of great heat, being hot and cold alternately, and that in order to expel the fever he had sat drinking the whole evening, a most dangerous thing to do. Next, that in the morning he had been unable to rise from his bed, and, being thirsty, had drunk more wine, a thing enough of itself to kill a man in such a fever. Then he lost his head, and 328 could tell me no more what had happened until he saw me standing by his bedside. In short, he had been in delirium, and was now in a lucid interval, out of which he would presently fall a-wandering again, and perhaps raving, and so another lucid interval, after which he would die, unless something could be done for him. I liked not his appearance, nor the account which he gave me, nor did I like his pulse, nor the strange look in his eyes. Death doth often show his coming by such a prophetic terror of the eyes. Humphrey, he said pitifully, it was no fault of mine that thou wast sent to the plantations. That I know full well, cousin, I answered him. Be easy on that score. And as for Alice, he went on, all is fair in love. I made no reply, because at this point a great temptation assailed my soul. You have heard how I learned many secrets of the women while I was abroad. Now, while we were in Providence Island, I found a woman of the breed they call half-caste. That is, half Indian and half Portuguese, living in what she called wedlock with an English sailor, who did impart to me a great secret of her own people. I obtained from her not only the knowledge of a most potent drug, known already to the Jesuits, but also a goodly quantity of the drug itself. This, with cert other discoveries and observations of my own, I was about to communicate to the college in Warwick Lane. As for this drug, I verily believe it is the most potent medicine ever yet discovered. It is now some years since it was first brought over to Europe by the Jesuits, and is therefore called pulvis jesuiticus, and sometimes Peruvian bark. When administered at such a stage of the fever as had now been reached by my unhappy cousin, it seldom fails to vivify the spirits, and so to act upon the nerves as to restore the sinking, and to call back to life a man almost moribund. Remembering this, I lugged the packet out of my pocket and laid it on the table. Be of good cheer, cousin, I said. I have a drug which is strong enough, with the help of God, to make a dying man sit up again. Courage, then. When I had said these words, my temptation fell upon me. It came in the guise of a voice which whispered in my ear. Should this man die, it said, there will be freedom for Alice. She can then marry the man she loves. She will be restored to happiness. While he lives, she must still continue in misery, being cut off from love. Let him die therefore. Humphrey, said Ben, in this matter of Alice, if she will come to me, I will make her happy. But I know not where she is hidden. Things go ill with me since that unlucky day. I would 329 to God I had not done it. Nothing hath gone well since, and I drink daily to hide her face. Yet at night she haunts me, with her father who threatens, and her mother who weeps, and my grandfather who reproaches. Humphrey, tell me, what is it, man? What mean thy looks? For while he spoke, that other voice was in my ears also. Should he die, Alice will be happy again. Should he live, she will continue in misery. At these words, which were but my own thoughts, yet involuntary, I felt so great a pity, such an overwhelming love for Alice, that my spirit was wholly carried away. To restore her freedom, Oh, what price was too great for such a gift? Nay, I was seized with the thought that to give her so great a thing, even my own destruction would be a light price to pay. Never until that moment had I known how fondly and truly I loved her. Why, if it were to be done over again, but this matters not, I have to make my confession. Humphrey, speak. I suppose that my trouble showed itself in my face. Thou art married to Alice, I said slowly. That cannot be denied. So long as thou livest, Benjamin, so long will she be robbed of everything that she desires, so long will she be unhappy. Now if thou shouldst die. Die, I cannot die, I must live. He tried to raise himself, but he was too weak. Cousin, save my life. If thou shouldst die, Benjamin, I went on, regardless of his words, she will be set free. It is only by thy death that she can be set free. Say then to thyself, I have done this poor woman so great an injury that nothing but my death can atone for it. Willingly, therefore, will I lay down my life, hoping thus to atone for this abominable wickedness. Humphrey, do not mock me. Give me speedily the drug of which you spoke. I die. Oh, give me of thy drug. Then I took the packet containing the pulvis jesuiticus and threw it upon the fire, where in a moment it was a little heap of ashes. Now, Benjamin, I said, I cannot help thee, thou must surely die. He shrieked, he wept, he implored me to do something, something to keep him alive. He began to curse and to swear. No one can now save thee, Benjamin, I told him. Not all the College of Physicians, not all the medicines in England, thou must die. Listen and heed, in a short time, unless thy present weakness causeth thee to expire, there will fall upon thee another fit of fever and delirium, after which another interval of reason, perhaps another, but yet thou must surely die. Prepare thy soul, therefore. Is there any message for Alice that thou wouldst send to her, being now at the point of death? His only answer was to curse and weep alternately. Then I knelt beside his bed and prayed aloud for him, but incessantly he cried for help, wearing himself out with prayers and curses. Benjamin, I said, when I had thus prayed a while, but ineffectually, I shall take to Alice instead of these curses which avail nothing, a prayer for pardon, in order to touch her heart and cause her to think of thee with forgiveness, as of one who repented at the end. This I shall do for her sake. I shall also tell thy father that thy death was repentant, and shall take to him also a prayer for forgiveness as from thee. This will lighten his sorrow, and cause him to remember thee with the greater love. And to Robin, too, so that he may cease to call thee villain, I will carry, not these ravings, but a humble prayer, as from thyself, for forgiveness. This is my confession. I, who might have saved my cousin, suffered him to die. The sick man, when he found that prayers or curses would not avail, fell to moaning, rolling his head from side to side. When he was thus quiet, I prayed again for him, exhorting him to lift up his soul to his judge and assuring him of our full forgiveness. But indeed, I know not if he heard or understood. It was then about 4 of the clock and growing dark. I lit a candle and examined him again. I think that he was now unconscious. He seemed as if he slept. I sat down and watched. I think that at midnight, or thereabouts, I must have fallen asleep. When I awoke, the candle was out and the fire was out. The room was in perfect darkness. I laid my hand upon my cousin's forehead. He was cold and dead. Then I heard the voice of the watchman in the street, past 2 o'clock and a frosty morning. The voice I had heard before whispered again in my ear. Alice is free, Alice is free. Thou alone hast set her free, thou hast killed her husband. I threw myself upon my knees and spent the rest of that long night in seeking for repentance. But then, as now, the lamentation of a sinner is also mingled with the joy of thinking that Alice was free at last, and by none other hand than mine. This, I repeat, is my confession. I might have saved my cousin, and I suffered him to die. Wherefore I have left the profession in which it was my ambition to distinguish myself, and am no longer anything but a poor and obscure person, living on the charity of my friends in a remote village. 2 days afterwards I was sitting at the table, looking through the dead man's papers, when I heard a footstep on the stair. It was Barnaby, who broke noisily into the room. "Where is Benjamin?" he cried. "Where is that villain? What do you want with him?" "I want to kill him, I am come to kill him." "Look upon the bed, Barnaby." I laid back the sheet and showed him the pale face of the dead man. "The hand of the Lord, or that of another, hath already killed him. Art thou now content?" Chapter the last. And I end the decline of years, when the 60th birthday is near at hand and one looks not to live much longer, and the future hath no fresh joy to bring with it, but only infirmities of age and pain. It is profitable and pleasant to look back upon the past, to observe the guidance of the unseen hand, to repent one's sins, and to live over again those seasons, whether of sorrow or of joy, which we now perceive to have been providentially ordered. This have I done, both in reading the history of our lives as related by my mistress, and in writing this latter part. To the former have I added nothing, nor have I subtracted anything therefrom, because I would not suffer the sweet and candid soul of her, whom I have always loved, to be tarnished by any words of mine, breaking in upon her own, as jarring notes in some lovely harmony. It is strictly laid upon me to deliver her words just as she hath written them down. Now, after the death of Benjamin, I took it upon myself, being his cousin, in the absence of his father, to examine the papers which he had left. Among them I found abundance of songs, chiefly in praise of wine and women, with tavern bills. Also, there were notes of legal cases, very voluminous, and I found notes of payment made to various persons engaged in inquiring after his wife, in those towns of the West Country where her father's name would procure friends for her. But there was no will. Benjamin had died, never looking for so early an end without making any will. Therefore the estate of Bradford Orcas with the old house became the property of the rector, Benjamin's father, and he, being moved to make reparation for his son's sin, and out of the great love which he bore to Alice, conveyed the whole to Robin on the day of his marriage. Thus the confiscated estate returned to the ancient family who had always held it, and promised to hold it still, so long as the good old stock shall last. It is 30 years ago and more. King William Roman III is dead, Queen Anne is dead, King George, who cannot, they say, speak English but is a stout Protestant, sits upon our throne. The nonconformists are free, save that they cannot enter the universities and are subject to other disabilities, which will, doubtless, be removed in the course of years. But English people, I think, love power beyond all earthly things, and so long as the Church is in a 333 majority, the churchmen will exercise their power and will not part with it. To us of Bradford Orcas it matters little. We worship at the parish church. Every Sunday I contemplate, as I did 50 years ago, the monument of Philippa kneeling apart, and of her husband and his second wife kneeling together. There is a new tablet in the chancel put up to the memory of Sir Christopher, and another to that of Dr. Comfort Aikin. Their bodies lie somewhere among the mounds on the north side of Ilminster Church. 40 years ago, as you have seen, there stood 3 boys in the garden of the manor house discoursing on their future. One wished never to go anywhere, but to remain always a country gentleman like his grandfather. One would be a great lawyer, a judge, even the Lord Chancellor. The third would be a great physician. Lo, the end of all, the first, but after divers miseries, perils, and wanderings, hath attained to his desire. The second lies buried in the churchyard of St. Andrew's, Holborn, forgotten long since by his companions, who, indeed, are now with him in the pit, and remembered only among his own kin for the great wickedness which he wrought before the Lord. And as for the third and last, no illustrious physician is he, but one who lives obscure but content in a remote village, in the very cottage where his mistress was born, with books and music, and the society of the sweetest woman who ever graced this earth for his solace. She was always gracious. She was gracious in her childhood, gracious as a maiden. More gracious still is she in these latter days when her hair is gray, and her daughters stand about her, tall and comely. Now, had I administered that powder, that sovereign remedy, the pulvis Jesuiticus, what would have been her lot? Humphrey, said Robin, a penny for thy thoughts. Robin, I was thinking, it is not a new thing, but 20 years old and more, that cousin Benjamin never did anything in his life so useful as to die. I, poor Benjamin, that he had at the end the grace to ask our forgiveness and to repent hath in it something of a miracle. We have long forgiven him. But consider, cousin, we were saved from the fight, we were saved from the sea, we were saved from slavery, we were enabled to strike the last blow for the Protestant religion. What were all these blessings worth if Benjamin still lived? To think, Humphrey, that Alice would never have been my wife and never a mother, and all these children would have remained unborn. I say that, though we may not desire the death of a sinner, we were not human if we rejoiced not at the death of our poor cousin. Yes, that is the thought which will not suffer me to repent. A single pinch of the pulvis Jesuiticus, and he might have been living unto this very day. Then would Alice have lost the crowning blessing of a woman's life. Yet I was, it is true, a physician, whose duty it is to save life, always to save life, even the life of the wretched criminal who is afterwards to die upon the gallows. Yet again, if he had been saved, as I write these lines I see my mistress walking down the village street. She looks over my garden gate, she lifts the latchet and enters, smiling gravely and tenderly. A sober happiness sits upon her brow. The terror of her first marriage has long been forgotten. Why, as I watch her tranquil life, busy with her household and her children, full of the piety which asks not, as her father was wont to ask, how and where the mercy of heaven is limited, and if, indeed, it will embrace all she loves. As I mark the tender love of husband and of children, which lies around her like a garment and prevents all her doings, there comes back to me continually a bedroom in which a man lies dying. Again in memory, again in intention, I throw upon the fire that handful of pulvis jesuiticus which should have driven away his fever and restored him to health again. A great and strong man he was, who might have lived till 80 years, where then would have been that love, where those children, where that tranquil heart and that contented mind. I will not save his life. I say again in my mind, I will not save him, he shall die. Humphrey, my mistress says, leave thy books a while and walk with me. The winter sun is warm upon the hills. Come, it is the day when Benjamin died. Repentant, what better could we wish? What greater blessing could have been bestowed upon him, and upon us than a true repentance and to die? Oh, dear brother, dear Humphrey, let us walk and talk of these blessings which have been showered upon my undeserving head.